Welcome to Mechs on Deck. It is episode 15. Today we're talking about layouts. But first, we definitely want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, switchmod.net. You can go to switchmod.net/mechs on deck and get 4% off your your lubing and switch modification accessories, all the things you need. Get them over there from Mr. Krelbit. Still running a group buy. The code does not work on group buys, but you can use it for everything else. Helps us out a little bit. Also, zap cables. Head over there, get yourself a DIY kit. Chewy's got a sticker for everything. Get yourself a DIY kit, put it together. We got some cool stuff in the works with zap cables. Some different stuff that they're going into that we're going to be looking at with them. So we're really excited about that, and you'll want to stay tuned for more. And if you're here from last Wednesday's stream or that video, you'll know that we had Olivia on last week. This next week at 8 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday night, tomorrow night, we will have Neflock, the creator of GMK Metropolis, will be joining us to talk a little bit about his key set and kind of how he started.
Yeah, should be exciting. So moving on, this is going to be a 2-part episode. We were working on this episode, and I realized that as much as I would love to release an 1.5 to 2 hour long episode, it might be best to just kind of divide it up, have a little more informative on the first half and a little more debate. Because Osiris and I can debate about anything forever. And I figured, why make a 3-hour video of us yelling at each other about things that shouldn't matter. All about preferences. So we're going to be talking about layouts. So we have used combined probably everything except for some of the more niche market with the 40% and the ergos and the so it's more kind of ergo, just a lot of the split boards and all that stuff. So, but outside of that, we do have experience with everything else. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through just kind of a pros and cons of each board layout, why they are good, why they are maybe not so good or not ideal for your situation. While I do not believe there is a bad keyboard, as long as it's a mechanical key switch or Topre, I guess. I don't really like Topre, but while I don't believe there's a bad one, there are certainly some benefits and certainly some boards I also do not like. So moving on, 60%. And most popular, probably one of the most popular layouts in the community, if not the most, just slightly edging out maybe a TKL. But 60%. What are the pros and cons? Give me some pros. Give me some good things.
Yeah, well, right off the bat, 60%, like you said, it has the most options available. That's the board that you're most readily going to be able to go online and purchase something that's in stock, ready to go, and get a lot of variance there. And a lot of the other layouts, while they may have stuff that's available, you're looking at just things from one vendor or maybe one or two vendors, whereas in 60%, you can get it from really anywhere. And it seems like there's pretty much almost always a 60% keyboard by running. Plus, that's going to be something, if you get comfortable on, you're going to be able to pick something up on Mech Market that's pretty good at all times, Mm-hmm. Plus, then there's a lot of support in the piece with the PCBs. We joke a lot about in our PCB video about the Swiss cheese that 60% boards have in their PCBs, but that is just a pro to that layout of what you can do with it. You can have an arrow cluster if you want. You can have a split backspace. You can have a short shift if you want, and you can do any combination of all of them. So you can really create your own layout, make it something that's unique to you, and something that you really, really like.
Yeah, absolutely. Some other good benefits to 60%. The PCB is one of the biggest ones for me personally, because being able to not have to, not all 60% boards are 60% PCB compatible or standard PCB compatible, but a lot of them are, and that can really help you in a pinch. But the form factor. So the form factor is already very small. It's very non-invasive on your desk space. So if you are someone who may not have that much desk space, being able to kind of maximize what extra space you do have is great. And if you're someone like myself or Osiris here who likes to game, having extra mouse space is very awesome and very ideal in that situation. Whereas compared to a TKL or something even bigger, you do lose a good chunk, a few inches of all that desk space. So if you're whipping your mouse around, you might slam your mouse into your keyboard. You don't want to damage it or anything like that. So being able to kind of have that freedom of space. If you do have a big desk, it's nice because you have more desk space. If you have a smaller desk, you're not overcrowding everything. You can fit on there. And it's small, so travel size. A nice travel board. If you see yourself traveling all the time, you hate using just your laptop. I know a lot of people that like to travel with their boards, and that being that small, it's a lot easier. I might not recommend bringing an 8-pound keyboard with you on the plane, but grabbing something like a Tofu at that size with that weight is just it's such a small board and so light and not very invasive that you can just throw it in your backpack and be on your way.
Yeah. Plus, with the fact that, most switches come in packs of 10, you're not buying a ton of switches, you're buying 70. If you can buy singles for whatever reason, you could buy even less, but most of the time they come in packs of 10. So it's not a high cost overall. And with all the different options you can get from, even different plate options, different materials and stuff like that are readily available, you can get out with a pretty low cost board overall. And with the PCBs that are available with like hot swap and having those be available, you can get something that you can use as like a tester board, which we've talked about before, or something that you just have kind of lying around that you can throw things in and out of, maybe use it to travel. So it's a really flexible layout to have.
Yeah. And the last kind of big pro is a lot now with HHKB becoming a very big thing. We are kind of including that layout of things that fall under the 60%. Those can be, but a standard ANSI, you are typically able to find most key sets are going to support 60%. So you're not going to have to run into issues of, trying to find keycaps that don't work for you or anything like that. So just something to keep in mind. You do need keycaps unless you're weird and type on. I'm sorry if you can hear. There's apparently a fire outside. But yeah, just being able to find keycaps is great. And give me 1 second. There we go. Sorry. And but moving on, there are some cons. They're definitely not. It's not the most ideal, especially coming from maybe a full size board. So, and the first things first, and most people notice now, while you can put arrow keys on a 60%, it does kind of mess up your situation. So it can, be a little awkward getting those arrow keycaps on. But at the end of the day, most of the time you're going to be losing those arrow keys. And a lot of people like the arrow keys, especially if you work in something like Excel. It can really mess up your kind of workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, if you're not someone that's used to, using like different function layers and stuff, it can take a little while to get adjusted to doing that. For me, when I first switched to 60%, it was hard to get away from using the not having the arrow keys, as well as I basically made my layout to give me a delete key instead of a function key, even that says function, just because I use that key so much in my workflow. But yeah, so you can kind of play around with it and do different things with it in order to get a layout that functions for you. It just might take a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm. So, and then just getting used, you're kind of forced into layers as well. And that can be something not too many people understand. So real quick, layers is basically you hit one key and then that turns the rest of your keys into another key. And so memorizing that can be tough. With the F keys, it's nice because it's just 1 through 12. You only have to remember 11 and 12's placement, but with the numbers, but that might not be something someone is wanting to have to do all the time. So if you need access and quick access to the F row or something else that a full size board might have, you're going to have to kind of get forced into having to use layers. Quick side note, my mic straight up just like fell.
Did it really?
Right when I was done, I was like, wait, my mic is falling into my hands. So sorry for any awkward noise while Osiris was talking, but my mic just decided to slip off my desk. So
sometimes it'd be like that.
Yeah, it wouldn't be Mechs on Deck without some sort of mic or audio problem.
We like to keep it spicy.
It's fun. So but outside of that, I mean, there's not a whole lot, but some of those cons of, I want arrow keys and I want F row and I need access to delete at all times and page up and page down. Those are very logical reasons to not get a 60%. So I personally, that is my favorite layout, is a 60% layout. Technically the win keyless is probably my personal favorite layout, but I can definitely understand why someone would not want to use it.
Yeah, it's like, I think basically all the cons versus this and the other layouts that we're about to go through as they kind of scale up is the level of adjustment you have to make when coming from a full size board in terms of the keys that you lose, and how to make up for those keys being lost or placed somewhere different. You don't realize how many keys you don't actually use on a keyboard until you go down to 60% and you're like, all right, I can do all of the functionality things that I did before with this. So, yeah.
So, but moving on, let's go to as far as I'm aware, your favorite layout, the 65%. We are going to include what people will call 66%, which doesn't make sense because it actually has less keys than 65%. But basically, this is a 60% with an extra row of keys, a 16th key on the horizontal plane to fit an arrow cluster, and then a few extra keys to the right of backspace.
Yeah. So as Chewy said, this is probably my favorite layout. For me, I'm not someone that ever really uses the function keys very often. So it was just a natural movement from a TKL or full size to a 65 because it gets you your arrow keys as well as, depending on how you have it set up naturally. But for a lot of people, it's delete, page up, page down, and tilde, I believe. I don't remember. I have mine all set up weird at work. So, but yeah, it's nice to have those extra keys available and the ability to go in and make adjustments to those keys to fit exactly what you need. As I just said, these are all based off of like the adjustment you have to make when switching from a larger keyboard. So having a 65% makes it really nice because you have your arrows, which you probably use a lot. When you're maneuvering around in like an Excel sheet or, you're doing different things in whatever system that you use to do what you do for work or at home. So it's nice to have those available and not lose your question mark key. Like I know that's the big thing with when you do the 60% and you basically flip your question mark goes to like the other side of the shift key, which is really strange, which can be very strange for someone who is trying to use it for a workflow setting and they still want their arrows. So this gives you the ability to have your arrows, the normal layout, or even a split backspace layout on your standard, what would be the 60%. And then you just have that extra functionality. So it's really nice because it still stays small.
Yeah. The having that extra functionality with remaining that size, it's maybe an inch larger. Some are a little bit bigger based on the size of the bezels, but still a very you're still maximizing desk space, I would say. If you're someone who uses like a wooden wrist rest, you're still able to kind of put that on there and still maximize desk space. So the other thing we've started to see lately, and I think a lot of this has to do with KBD fans and what they're selling, is we're starting to see more and more PCBs that are standardizing the 65%. So we're seeing, a while, just if you kind of rewind time, even 6 months, it is outside of a TDA or something that probably has a proprietary PCB. 65% were hard to get PCBs on. But we are starting to see that the popularity is growing. I know that KBD has made their 65% PCB, as well as the TDA being a little more, their PCB being more available. And then the Zeal 65 for center mounted USBs are becoming a little more or more attainable to get. So, having that kind of benefit, there are a lot of boards that don't have that benefit. And it's nice to see 65% kind of step into that next level of availability.
Yeah, absolutely. There's tons of stuff that you can get readily now. When I first started, the first board that I ever built and ended up being Chewy's first board as well was the TDA 68. It's a fantastic deal. $100 for basically a full kit, includes caps and everything. You just got to buy switches, which you can get for like $20 if you get like a Gatoron. Like my first board was a Gatoron Brown board that I built, and I think it was like $140 with shipping. That's a fantastic deal to get a full board. You don't have a lot of the fancy stuff. It's a tray mount, plastic case, aluminum plate, I believe, or steel. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But the thing is what's nice about that deal as well is with what KBD Fans has done recently and in the past year or so is giving an upgrade path for people with the aluminum cases, and then now the Tofu 65, and then now creating, brass plates for those boards as well. And then having a board like the KBD 67, which is a little bit of a variation on the TDA 68 layout, but it's still very similar to that 65%. Really, it's a lot that's available. And, if you do have a 65% and you want to desolder it and get something else, or you just want to make another build, you can do that now, which you couldn't like 2 years ago. They just weren't as available. And
yeah, that KBD 67 really is kind of it's an awesome board. Mm-hmm. If you buy a TDA and then you're like, man, I like the TDA, but I see all these metal cases and I don't want to spend, I'm not, you think of the person that's not looking to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. You can go, well, I want to try these new switches. They have a hot swap variant too, which is huge for 65%. So, someone going from a plastic case TDA and then going, you know what, I think I want to get kind of the in-game board. The KVD 67 is an awesome case. It's got a nice brass weight. It's design aesthetically, it's very pleasing. They're one of the biggest issues is they have a hard time staying in stock. So
yeah, absolutely. And then you have more high end boards coming with it. We've seen recently, I think when I first started the big high end board, it was right when the Rama M65A had ended. And that was, a big step in the right direction, I guess, for the 65%. But now you've got other boards like the TGR 910, KOU, the one that's KAIU that looks kind of similar to the TGR, the Accent, bunch of, and then the right now that's running is the NK65. It's the Novel Keys 65% board. So there's tons of stuff that's out there to get into, and key sets are starting to show more support for it.
Yeah,
which is really nice because you can. The hardest thing to find in a lot of those was the short shift, which is coming more readily available in different key sets. Obviously, if you're getting something that's lesser expensive, like a lot of the sets you can get on like the Tai Hao sets won't have it, and those basically only support just like standard layouts. But some of them are starting to support these, more exotic layouts. And a lot of times you can kind of play with it, and you might have some keys that don't necessarily match what the key actually does, but it'll still work.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and the last kind of thing is you still only need about 70 switches. It's the same amount, so you'll have less left over, but you still don't need that many switches. So it's still in regards to price, pretty low on the totem pole, I would say. So, but moving on, 75%. So 75% is basically a 65%. So it has that 16th key on the right side, but you've now added a F row on top with an escape, and some keys will have some, depending on the layout, if there are cutouts at the top. Sometimes the maximum you can get is 16, so it'd be an escape, all of your F keys, and then 3 more on the top. But we've seen other boards, some more high-end boards, who will omit some of those top keys to make it a little more maybe aesthetically pleasing. But you get the F row. So, and that's kind of a big one. So getting that F row can help a lot of people go from potentially a TKL or a full size board going to a 75%. You go, okay, most of everything that I have is here. It might just not be in the exact place, but that's something that's really easy for people to understand and get back into and kind of understand, okay, some of these keys that I don't really use all the time anyway, they're still here. They're just in a slightly different place. And I think that's one of the biggest draws to that 75%, because on top of that, because it's only as wide as 65%, you really do cut down on the footprint of the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that I have a 75%. That's probably the board I use most, other than 65 is I have my orange 75. And one thing I love about the 75% layout is you have all that functionality. So if you're going into a new program and you need to use your F5 key for some reason, it's there. You don't have to worry about fumbling around and rebinding it in a game or in a different program. So it's nice to have that functionality, and it's there. One thing that I love about 75% boards as a whole is when you're looking at different high-end 75%, it has really the most variance in the case, the way that it's made and how the layouts are functioned. Like obviously a 60% board is just here's the keys, and then the variance is all in the case that's surrounding it. Whereas even on a 65%, there's not really a whole bunch of variance. You have the layouts like the clue board, which is kind of like 65%. It just looks a little bit different. So you have those variants, but on a 75%, like Chewy said, you have some where they have a little bit less keys, some where the spacings are all different. The F keys line up differently on different cases. There's so much variance in all of them. Look at something like, take something like the Orange 75 and you look at the KBD 75, they look completely different based on how that is set up. So it's something where you can get something that you really like, the way that it looks visibly, and it have a little bit variance over what else is on the market.
Mm-hmm. A couple other things as well is most key sets do support this. Your F row is going to be the same as your top row anyway. So most key sets are going to support this. So you're not going to run into a whole lot of issues. You do still have that short shift. So you're going to run into the same problems as the 65% case. But regardless, we're starting to see more and more short shift compatibility across the board. But one thing that, we didn't really talk about, I guess, really as a con for 60 and 65% is you don't have to change where the escape key is. So most people, where the 60% and 65%, where the escape key goes is typically on a more standard board is where the tilde key goes. So not having to kind of switch, and that takes a couple days, but regardless, kind of if when you're someone who's brand new and you're kind of looking, you go, whoa, timeout, I'm missing all these keys. Where's the escape? Oh, the escape's there now. Like, what's going on? So having the ability to kind of still have that escape key where it is can really help bring people from the, I did TKLs or full size boards into the, okay, I think I can go with the smaller footprint. I need my F keys, my escapes in the same place. I think I can handle this. And I think that's a good draw to that. And then outside of that, this is kind of more of a personal thing, but when it comes to, we talked about, Cyrus talked about being creative. Like some of these 75% boards are some of the coolest looking boards on the market because there's just so much you can do with them. But keycap sets, a lot of times to me, you miss out on that mismatched F row. The color variation can really kind of round out the key set. And I wish that, I had that. I don't really use anything above 60% anymore, but I do kind of miss that. I love that look where you have the extra, maybe it's accent F row, or maybe it's just mod colored F row. Having that aesthetic to it where it kind of completes the entire look, I think is extremely aesthetically pleasing. And, having access to that is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's something that, 75% is a layout that's kind of, I guess, taking off a little bit. We've had a couple buys this year. The Xeno, Orange 75 was around this time last year. There's the 7Z coming up. Exclusive has run a couple 75%, but it's probably one of the more niche layouts when you're looking at like what would be considered a standard layout. It's not like a ergonomic or a 40% or something like that. It's probably of the ones that we've talked about so far, and even if you include obviously TKL, it's probably the least popular overall in terms of the number of buys. I don't know if that's something that will change, but it's really a cool and fun layout to be able to play with. It's very aesthetically pleasing, and there's a lot of creativity in the cases. There's a lot of room for designers to go in and do things like put different brandings on it and make it even more aesthetically pleasing, which we've seen recently, which is really nice.
Yeah, like we'll shout out Canon keys. They did the Satisfaction 75, and I had a knob on it instead of the I think it sacrificed 2 keys for a knob or like a volume knob or something, which is so cool. Like that we're moving into that now. And so I hope it grows because I just, I think as 60% are always going to be there, 65% are going to be kind of tailing behind, but still there in the 60%. But we're seeing a lot of 60% in TKLs, but I think 75% is such a cool, there's so much room in that kind of space that, it could be something that looks great. Like I'm really excited to see the Xeno and how that turns out.
Yeah. And when you're looking at it too, it's not like we've talked a little bit with 60 and 65% about saving desk space. The 75%, even though it is bigger and it sounds like it's a lot bigger, it's actually really not. It grows vertically rather than horizontally. Like when we look at TKL, when you look at a TKL board, there's a lot of empty space. Whereas a 75%, especially on something like a KBD 75, there's like almost no empty space. And you're talking about growing, from 60 to 65, you grow 1U vertically. Well, from 65 to 70,
1U horizontally, by the way.
Horizontally. And then from 65 to 75, you grow 1U vertically. Now, obviously, different cases will shift that higher or lower, but you're talking about growing vertically rather than horizontally. So it still saves you a good amount of desk space, and you have, a high amount of functionality.
Yeah, absolutely. The only the biggest cons are PCB support. There's not really a standard. Most higher end boards are going to have exactly their PCB because there's all that room for creativity and all those different variations. You are going to be having to buy 15 more switches. So that 70 switch is probably going to have to go up to about 90 switches to be able to kind of have everything with a couple extra switches. So just the added expense, if you want to try out the 75%, I highly recommend the KBD 75 because you can buy PCBs from their website. But I don't think we're ever really going to see a standard 60 or 75% PCB just because it might be standard, but there's only going to be about 5 boards maybe that can use it. So, I mean, I think you've shown it before, but the 75% PCB for the Fox Lab Orange 75 is the strangest looking thing I've ever seen in a PCB. It's got a big cutout for it.
It's got like a square for the controller, and
it's it's just a with that room for creativity comes that cost of not having access to PCBs all the time. So, moving on though, TKLs.
Yeah, TKLs are definitely the easiest place to really start if you're coming from a full size board. The problem is there's not really a good place to start from a monetary point of view. There's not a lot of options in a TKL, especially a full custom TKL. There's not a lot of options that are not very expensive. It's not like a 60 or 65% where you can go get a Tofu or a Tada for a couple $100, or even like a KBD 75 for you're spending, what would be considered mid to high end on like a 60% board for something out of the TKL range. Your benefit there is there's been a crap load of TKL buys recently. So there's a lot out there. It's just that they're all pretty expensive.
Yeah. Really your only option in the kind of sub $200 range is the GMMK, which, I mean, that's still a plastic case. It's a hot swap board, but it's a plastic case. Nothing wrong with plastic cases. But if you're looking for that that has more of a gamery look to it, and if you're looking for something that might be more, kind of what our mechanical keyboards has, which is a lot of aesthetically pleasing metal boards, with chunky metal and heavy. That's not going to be it. But yeah, they are everywhere. I mean, if you look, you got the Jane V2, you've got the KBD has their new 8X model. Pretty much any high-end board is going to have a TKL variant to it. The TX boards, the TX84 and 87 are fantastic boards. So Rama just came out with the U80. So now these boards come at that price though. If you can get in on like a TGR, like a Jane V2, at group buy and you're lucky enough, you're going to have an awesome board, but you're going to have to pay, $400 or $500 at group buy price and try double, triple that on the mech market. So
yeah, it's definitely an expensive route into the hobby. And one thing that's nice though is that you have support from basically every key set ever made. You're looking at a very standard layout. It's a lot of the PCBs do support things like split backspace or changes to the bottom row and whatnot. But a lot of times you're not going to really see that in a lot of the TKLs. You might see some variance in the bottom row, but there's not going to be as much split backspace in TKLs just because you have so much room and so much space. So it's nice to be able to, go into every keycap set knowing that it's going to work for you and not really having to question it especially if you're on just like a standard TKL layout.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and with something that I mentioned kind of in the 75%, you get that kind of color variation. So we see, with keycaps, these designers are doing them for a reason. So if you have accent key arrow keys and accent key enter, the F row, the escape, you being able to, one thing that I've talked with our one of our mods on our Discord is Moon, and he talks about the diving board effect, where if you have on a 65% or a 75%, if you have the arrow cluster and the enter all in accent keys, it kind of makes this big clump that might not be as aesthetically pleasing as you might want. So that with TKL, it spreads it out, and TKLs look really clean. Like from just looking at it, they look, if you get a nicer one, they look great. I had a KBD 8X Rev, it's I guess Mark 1, but Rev 2, or maybe it was Rev 3, I don't remember, but it looked great. I love the way it looked. Everything was laid out nice, and because it's got everything functionally. Outside of having a number pad, it's the most functional keyboard.
Yeah,
it has the most keys for that side. Obviously, it's because it's the biggest, but outside of having a number pad, it's got more keys than the 75%. It has everything if you need. You can have you have all the access to the other keys. And if you need that, 2.75 shift, you're able to have that if for whatever reason, that's a big deal to you. There's still some layout options you can choose, but functionally it's exactly what you want. And it's one of the easiest to go from. A lot of people are used to having a TKL, and then going, either TKL or full size. So going from that to this is the easiest switch because it's basically the same board.
Yeah, you're literally it's just a full size board. You just hack off the numpad. So don't do that at home though.
Yeah, please don't hack off your numpads.
We are not responsible for any hacked off numpads. But no, it's super, super functional. It's very, very nice to use. It looks aesthetically pleasing. I will say one thing that I'm not as big of a fan of, to me, from the not functionality, but from the aesthetic point of view, even though it does look nice, you have a lot of what I deem wasted space when you look at this versus a 75 or 65 or 60%, especially when you go from 75 to a TKL. You have a ton of just bare metal, or whatever, anodized or whatever it is. There's a bunch of space where there's not keycaps. That's there. And unlike in the 75% where people use that space creatively and play with the way that things are oriented, for the most part, TKLs are all just like, here you go. This is what it is. There's not a lot of changes in the spacing, changes in where the keys are shifted. So it's a very basic layout. But it's very functional and very easy to use. It's very normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is normal. A couple more cons though. For gamers, it's a big board. It's a long board. You might slam your mouse into it. It's a lot of them. If you're getting a metal one, the KVD8X Rev 3 that I had, it was almost 5 pounds and it didn't have a weight. So if you're looking at these high end boards and going, oh, it's gonna be great, like an 8-pound board is heavy. Like it's not something you can just pick up. Like, I mean, I'm holding my TX60 is, in the 4.5 pound range, 4 to 4.5 pounds. And it can be annoying to move. So if you're someone that kind of shifts where your board is, like that's not an easy, quick fix because it's big and heavy. But so it's not ideal. You're looking at buying a lot of switches, and they're very expensive outside. It was funny to see when the 8X Mark II came out, and they're like, it's a very nice high end TKL with a brass weight and everything at only $300. And it's like, cool. Do you get caps and switches? No. So you're going to be spending over $500 on this keyboard. That's like, that's not a cheap board. But that's what was considered cheap in the TKL community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
moving on from the TKL though, you got the 96 keys or the CP or the 1800. Goes by many names. Basically, it's just like a bunched up full-size keyboard.
Pretty much. So, the biggest draw to this, the absolute biggest, the only reason people really consider this outside of maybe just wanting a huge board is the numpad. The numpad is something that is weird to give up. When I went from my Razer Black Widow that had a numpad, when I was looking at a potential upgrade, I went to just something that was a little bit smaller. I had the Cooler Master Master Keys Pro M. So it was basically a TKL without the arrow keys. It was actually a numpad. So there was no designated arrow keys. It was a function layer.
It's a really cool layout, by the way.
I wish more people did that, because that's like, I do miss that layout a lot. It is very similar to the CP layout, but there's no like kind of awkward arrow key thrown in there. But it's a cool layout. But when I went down to 65%, I was like, man, I'm gonna have to not use my numpad anymore. So if you're someone who needs a numpad, these boards are for you. That's going to be one of the biggest draws to having that, is going, oh, I want that as a numpad. And, if you're someone who maybe games at home and you're at work and you have to use, you'll use Excel, or you have to punch in a bunch of numbers, and you have the ability to own multiple boards, like one of our mods, Willio 70, his work board is a 96 key because he needs the numpad for everything. So, but he's got he's got a Tofu at home. So, that's a great, kind of work board. It's one of the most functional work boards because you have everything that you need.
Yeah. And it's easy to switch to. If you're coming from a full keyboard to a 96, you're not taking away very much. There's pretty even functionality across the board between the two of them. It does use most of a full key set in terms of when you're looking to buy like a keycap set from like GMK or something, or SP or whatever, or if you're just getting something from like Taihao or something. It does use most of that full key set, wise some of the different layouts that are available do use different smaller keys. Some of them use short shift keys. Some of them use standard, and then they just have it shifted weird. You'll see, just like 75%, this is a layout that you see a lot of variance in. You have something, why is the name I can't even remember the name. It's the one from Kono that Willio has.
The Kira.
Yeah, something like the Kira versus like a GXCP. They look very different in their layout, but they're both that 96 key layout. So there's a lot of variance there. Plus you have like the 1800 where it's like even bigger physically, but yeah, there's a lot going on with it. It's a really cool layout. Not my cup of tea, but super, super functional.
Yeah. Having that numpad is nice. I think it's like the perfect all work and no play board.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, it's like a good, if you're someone who's like a accountant or something and you're having to use a numpad all the time and you don't want to have like a dedicated numpad off on the side, this is perfect for you. You know, it's a fantastic layout.
And I will say like the Kira is an awesome board. You know, I've used one before for a little bit and it's it's a hot swap board. So comes with keycaps, all that comes with switch. It comes complete. It actually even has a nice little case. So it's a fantastic board and something that I could very easily see someone going, you know, at that price point of like what is like $180, I think, $180. At that price point, I could see someone going, oh, I want to buy a custom mechanical keyboard, looks at a Razer and then looks at the Kira and goes, oh, I want the Kira. It looks a little more aesthetically pleasing. It's not gamery, but it still has some fancy lights. Like it's that slam dunk from Kono for doing that. But one thing that we're starting to see, which I am a huge fan of, a lot of people are a huge fan of, but is we're starting to see base kits from GMK sets and SA sets and a lot of other sets omit the numpad, because the numpad is such a niche thing, which is so funny to think that in a community about keyboards, something that a lot of people swear by is a niche thing. But pulling that out of the base sets, so now you're having to spend even more money on keycap sets for a board that's going to cost more money. Outside of the Kira, there's not really, you've got the KBD19X, and then outside of those two, you're starting to run real low on options.
Yeah.
So spend the affordable range. But it is still a very cool layout. And quick shout out to, I believe his name, Drifting Bunnies. He's in our Discord. It's got the Austin coming out soon. 96 key. Looks great. It's got 2 extra little keys kind of thrown in there for some fun functionality. So I will say they look amazing.
They do look really cool. They're just really big.
Yeah.
It's just like you basically, what a lot of them do, especially like the Kira, is it just cuts out every bezel or space of aluminum, you know, like I said in the TKL, where there's a lot of like just bare aluminum or whatever the case material is. There's a lot of that just blank space. 96 keys, a lot of them are just like, meh. Just like, let's just push it together, put all the keys here. It's very scrunched up. It does look really cool. When I say scrunched up, I don't mean it like in a super negative way. I mean it like, it's just like a functionality way of
compact,
making a full size board, but having it still be a compact or more compact layout.
Yeah. So other than that, you get to use that numpad coloration with key sets. Just added more color. That's why I think it looks so aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah. Like on the Kira, you've got the nice little break with those colored arrow keys.
Yeah. And then that you get that extra enter on the numpad for extra accent color. It looks great. It looks fantastic. So moving on to some of the lesser used layouts. Quick apology to anybody that took our our Google form survey. I did leave out these next couple of layouts, and I apologize. I was not thinking of them because I forget that they exist sometimes.
You're saying sorry while simultaneously probably pissing them off more.
I'm sorry. It's if you use a 40%, props to you, but I don't get it. So I get it. I understand layers are a thing. That's why I use 60%. But I need a number row. But gaming, you need your number row for gaming a lot.
Yes,
Just
very
saying.
true.
40% boards. Huge benefit, maximum desk space. It's smaller than a 60%. Significantly. You've taken what already is a small board and chopping a fifth of it off. Right off the top. So small board, better travel board than the 60%. Just less functionality.
Yeah, basically it doesn't really have a whole lot of bells and whistles when you're looking at, you know, a 40% versus literally anything else. It's extreme functionality. It's the basis of what a keyboard is. It's literally just letters.
Layers on layers on layers and layers and layers on layers.
It's just letters, basically.
It's just letters, a space bar, an enter, and a function key. That's all you need.
Yeah.
So, a huge downside, unfortunately, is keycaps. They're hard to get. They have very specific sized keycaps. We do see a lot of 40s kits. So if you're ever like scrolling through and you see what's a 40s kit, keep scrolling. But that's what those are used for, the smaller enters, so they can maximize the small form factor while still not having to get rid of every single key. So we are seeing a lot, but that you do run into that issue often. But relatively inexpensive. Most of them are not super duper crazy expensive. Most group buys like the Plank. I think one of the nicer ones was the Pearl. And that wasn't like some ridiculous number, if I'm not mistaken. You don't have to buy as many switches. So, I remember during the Holy Panda craze last year, a lot of people made them with Holy Pandas because you only needed like 40 or 50. You didn't need to spend 70 times $6 worth of money on switches. You don't have to get as many. So,
yeah. And you have the ability of, if you take your board to work, no one's going to ever steal it and mess with it because they don't know how to use it. Because they look at it and they're like, what the heck is going on?
You get some weird looks, but you don't get your stuff taken.
Yeah. They do actually look really cool. Like aesthetically, they can play with, especially with, I don't know, for some reason, whenever I think about like ortholinear and 40%, like all those, it makes me think just of specifically like XDA and DSA kits, because I know that those have a lot of support for it, and the uniform rows really help with the support for those. But they look really cool, like the color variations that you can get with the support from the different sets does make it really, really cool looking.
But I will say, it's not something that I would recommend right off the bat. If you go to a 60% and then you're like, I could go smaller, turn off your number row and see what happens. But I wouldn't go from like a full size to a 40%. That would be, do what you want by all means. But we talk about having experiences here, and that sounds like a nightmare scenario for me of being in a rough spot. But anyway, last but not least, Ergo. Ergo, it kind of encompasses a lot of different things. So you've got like stuff like the Alice, so just things that are more angled for ergonomic help, all the way to kind of like the split Ergo boards. So benefits there. I personally don't really use these. I haven't tried the Alice and love the Alice layout. It feels very nice, but stuff, even just the straight across, I guess the Ergo layout, or ortholinear layout. So it's just a grid. It's not staggered. So these are all just kind of layouts that are helping people with ergonomics of where they want to place their hands and all of that. So those are, definitely for people who are looking for like maximum usability is what's happening. You're especially with the split boards, you can place them exactly how you want them. You can place, you're not running into any issues of like carpal tunnel or any RSIs or anything where your wrists are hurting or your fingers are hurting. But once again, we run into some issues. So
yeah, when you talk about ergonomic layouts, especially like different split ones, this is where you have the most issues with keycaps. Like these use very specific keycap layouts. Different ergonomic layouts use different keycaps. This is where you're having to get a ton of different compatibility, and you're going to be limited in what sets you can buy with this layout. Obviously, again, like 40%, you have a lot of support with DSA and XDA, and you're starting to get more and more support with sets from like GMK. But it's also weird because like in a GMK set, with the way that the rows are done, especially and SA as well, some of the ergonomic boards just feel weird. Like they have a couple of those ergonomic boards that are actually like the board itself is somewhat sculpted. So those keycaps really change with that. Yeah. So, and another thing is, this is really probably the most like, I think, creative design. I don't know. I think it's hard.
You can get really creative to an extent.
There's a lot of people that just like will print their own version of different ergonomic layouts. I remember I saw a couple months ago a guy, I think it was on our mechanical keyboards, but he had 3D printed his own that was like the keyboard went all the way up to where he was hitting keys with his knuckles when he typed. And it was just like all about just being, his fingers were inside of a little keyboard cage, basically. But
I think I remember you sending that to me.
It's just like, it's crazy what people do with some of these ergonomic layouts, because it's all about ergonomics. Whereas all these other ones are based off of, their name is based off of their number of keys they use and stuff like that. This is literally just kind of like an open book of like, an ergonomic board is what works best for you. So there's a lot of different layout variations. There's a little bit more of a gray area whether it goes in terms of the overall layout.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of this is what works best for you. So we are going to, in part 2 of this, we are going to debate into the ground which one's the best, at least what we think. But and kind of go through and kind of compare them. We've talked about pros and cons. We are going to compare them each. But at the end of the day, Ergo does kind of capture that idea of like, how can we make your typing experience custom to you, as opposed to you having to get used to something else. You have to get used to something that is exactly how you would want it. So, but that's going to be end of part 1, very pros cons list. And then part 2, which will come out next week, will be
the debate
discussions about the pros and cons of them compared to each other, and why you shouldn't get a 65%.
It's going to be the great debate.
The great debate of 2019 in July. So real quick, shout out to switchmod.net. Switchmod.net/Mechs on Deck. Get you 4% off your order outside of group buys. Check out Krelbit. Get you some lube for those switches. You get some Holy Pandas. You get those new inks everybody's trying to get. Grab some lube. Take some from good to great and switches. So check him out. And then Zap Cables, we got some stuff coming up with him. So be sure to check out zapcables.com. Get yourself a DIY kit. You can check our video out of how to build the DIY kit. About 2 weeks after we did that video, I made more cables and I had to go back and reference it. And I have 3 working cables. So it even works.
It does.
So check those guys out. And what do we got tomorrow again?
Yes, we're going to have a stream with a keycap designer whose name is Neflock. Again, he is the designer behind the very, very popular set GMK Metropolis. It ran a couple months back, did very, very well. It ran during the great GMK buy of 2019 when there was like 9 sets running at the same time.
The gauntlet.
Yeah, it did the best out of all of them, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Outside, I think maybe Hamon did. Well, Hamon came out right before.
Yeah,
that.
It did very well. Either way, it did very, very well.
Top two for sure.
It was a very successful buy. It's in production. He's got keycap the samples back. They look fantastic. Our boy Willie070 is super stoked for that. But yeah, Neflock's going to be coming on the stream tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Central Time. If you're watching this in the future, still click the link, go give us a follow. We stream every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central with other streams kind of dropped in there. And speaking of that, we are offering building. If you want your board built on stream, click the link to our Discord. You can request a build service in there. There's a channel. You can put what you need. There's some instructions. Go ahead and do it. We'd love to build your board. We'd love to put it on stream for you. Helps us out a little bit. And, you get yourself a fancy board made.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, be sure to tune in next week on the part 2 to this video. See kind of more thoughts after this was information dump. But yeah, once again, check out our Discord and make sure to subscribe for future content for that future episode 2 or episode 16, which will be part 2 to this. And be sure to swing by, say hello.
Yeah. We'll see y'all real soon.
Bye, Switch Tester.
Not a switch tester, but close enough.